All right, I'm going to call tonight's meeting to order. Can we have roll call?
Councilmember Murray.
Present.
Councilmember Payne Donovan.
Present.
Councilmember Ryan.
Here.
Councilmember Sonmore.
Here.
Councilmember Woodard.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wall.
Here.
Mayor Matsumoto Wright.
Here. All right, thank you. So next on our agenda is executive session for one or more of the purposes identified in our CW 42.30.110, parentheses 1, to discuss the city manager candidates with the consultant. So do we then go into the back room now? Do we have to say how many minutes this is going to take?
Yeah, and we can extend it if necessary. I would recommend you start with at least 30 minutes.
All right. So we're going to go into executive session for 30 minutes, and we should be back until 7:32. We're back in session. No action taken. So next is the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. A few brief items to walk the council through this evening. I think you're all aware of the Congresswoman Del Benny's visit scheduled for tomorrow, so I won't go into that again. I did meet yesterday with a group of seniors at the clubhouse or the senior center in Mountlake Terrace, including the board chair and the director of the agency, to talk about concerns they have as their lease is about to expire, and there's a need to review what the next steps are to work with the seniors. So it's a productive discussion, and so the wheels are in motion for proposals to come back for renewal and a continuation of the relationship, and perhaps to serve more seniors in a more robust fashion now that the pandemic's over, and also to use the building to a greater degree. Our meeting was joined by the Edmonds Senior Center Director, who is very interested in partnering with the City of Mountlake Terrace. So that was a productive meeting yesterday. Next week, there's a Transit Connections Corridor Community Update. I think some of you are aware of that. That's on the 23rd, which is Thursday, 7 p.m. And so there'll be an opportunity to review the plans with the community, specifically about the trail design and amenities for Veterans Memorial Park as a part of that project. And so that is in City Hall here at 7 p.m. next Thursday. The work on the easement with the Millstream Development Group in relation to the Sound Transit property and to, the Sound Transit station, and to have the city's trail be part of an easement with the private developer. That essentially the conditions have been agreed to. There's been a lot of discussion. So I believe as of this week, there is no disagreement about the issues, and so the final format is being put together by attorneys for the parties. So I'm pleased that the easement on the city's trail is in its very final stages. The vaccination policy that the City of Mountlake Terrace put into place back in October of 2021 has been terminated, effective tomorrow. A number of staff, a number of cities in the area are no longer requiring vaccination. It's no longer being required by health agencies throughout our area, and we've had an issue with new employees questioning whether they want to apply for jobs here because of those requirements. And so in considering what we did a survey of what other cities are doing and the conditions that have been relaxed, and sadly there were a number of employees in the city who separated or were terminated during the last couple of years because of lack of vaccination, those people certainly are eligible to apply for positions again. And this is certainly a situation that a number of local governments in the area are facing. But I felt it was no longer justified based on the state of science in the area. And also, I think for us to be more competitive in our ability to have both police officers and other positions to receive job applicants, it was, I believe, the right thing to do. And so we are now joining other local governments in doing that, but it needed to be officially taken as a policy to terminate the former city manager's policy, which was done. And so I will be happy to share with you the memo that carefully explains the reasons for the steps and the basis upon which that decision was made. I mentioned to you previously that there would be a presentation to the council on the communications strategy, the long-term communication strategy with our new communications manager who was appointed just recently, Ricky Frusciante. And so we're looking at March 6th, which is a couple of weeks away, to do that. And so I'm eager for council to weigh in on that policy and to have that be a collaborative effort. We've also talked about the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA funding, and the need to further discuss where we want to go. And so I'm proposing that on March 16th, we have an opportunity to devote a workshop to that subject so that the council can hear some staff recommendations and the council can then decide how to move forward with the council's own initiatives for that funding that we've discussed before. And last but not least, the city manager selection process is moving forward, and we are scheduled with council interviews on Saturday, March 4th, with a certain number of finalists, and there will also be on Friday, March 3rd, 3 advisory panels. One would be a managers and department directors panel, one would be a staff panel, and one would be a community stakeholder panel. So the 3 panels will have advisory meetings, not so much interviews per se, but to provide input to the council on a decision that the council will be making about the selection of so-called permanent city manager to come in the next few weeks. There will also be a reception for the community on that evening, that Friday evening, which will provide an opportunity for members of the general public to come to City Hall and to meet and greet the city manager finalist candidates, and also to hear each one of them in turn introduce themselves to the community in terms of a brief introductory series of comments about themselves and why they're interested in becoming the Mountlake Terrace city manager. And that, Madam Mayor and members of the council, would conclude my report unless there are questions for me.
Are there any questions or comments? All right. So we're going to move on to the next on our agenda, and that is the discussion on passport program and additional FTE in finance.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. I would like to first introduce the staff that are behind me. There's Jennifer Jewett, who is utility billing, our one staff member for utility billing. And we have the treasurer, Mick Horton, here. He's going to be, if there are any questions about the passport program, he's here to answer them because he was here back when the program was active. And Jennifer is our expert on utility billing, if there are any questions.
Can I just add that she is the, like you said, the one person, and she does all the emails and anyone that comes in to complain,
Yep,
anyone that, I mean, one person doing all of that, I have to just give her an applaud.
right?
Applause. So,
She's amazing.
Mick also deserves
yes, and then make us,
all the years of experience and everything.
20 years,
yes.
Thank you.
yes. So today I'll be presenting about the passport program that we're going to get started again. Prior to the pandemic, this program was in place, and also utility billing, hence the picture of the water. The finance department is requesting an additional FTE for the passport program. 50% would be charged to the general fund. 50%, the utility billing is charged to the general fund, but it gets reimbursed by the utility fund. So you can see here, this is the financial services. We have a finance director, accounting supervisor, accountant, 4.75 finance technicians, and the finance coordinator, who's the person that's up front, answers the phones, routes the calls, all that, does cash receipting. So we had 7.75 staff. With this proposal, I'm requesting an additional FTE, which would bring it to 8.75. And then the breakout is between financial services and utilities. So utilities right now is 1.5 person. So the 1 is Jennifer and half is the financial coordinator. But since there's been a lot more cash receipting coming in, he hasn't been entirely able to help with utility billing to his fullest capacity. And so I'm requesting an additional half an FTE to be coded to that utility billing. So then that person can answer the questions that aren't, with the help, because I'll show you on the next slide. So the passport program started in 2006, and back then it was run by this customer service unit. It was actually a customer service manager and a staff of 3. In 2008, the treasurer, Mick Horton, and the AP staff, which was Myrna and Terry, and they were able to assist. So you can see that's 6 people were running the passport program back in 2008. In 2009, the customer service program was cut, so then it was the staff of 3 was performing the duties along with their duties that they were already performing. So some things could have fallen behind, in the passport program, we didn't have it up and running as much as we could have because of that. In 2020, the program was closed due to the pandemic and City Hall closing. I think at one point they had them doing appointments and people were coming in by appointment only. And I think it just, dwindled since then, and then travel was cut and everything, so it just didn't make sense to have it at that time. And utility billing, here's Jennifer. One full-time person for utility billing. Prior to 2009, the customer service unit would answer the customer questions, calls, and apply payments to the bills, and they would do all of that. There are over 6,300 customers right now, and 8 routes for one person. It's pretty overwhelming for one person to do, but she does it, to the best of her ability. So another half-time person would, I think, really help a lot. Especially if we're trying to get new software implementation for people to pay online and be able to do that. And so having that half-time person be able to assist with that implementation will be very beneficial. Here is the passport program revenue and cost projections. Mick put this together for me. He got the applicants one every 15 minutes. And for 23 and 24, this is the revenue that would be generated. 14 passport applications at $35 each, and then 7 passport photos at $16 each. And yes.
What Nick is saying, that every day, every 15 minutes?
Would you like to come up there?
Every day, every 15 minutes, there's an applicant? Is that- And we have that many? Oh,
There is a tremendous demand, and there's very few facilities right now, such as City of Mill Creek, City of Lake Forest Park, that are actually open for passports. And more and more opening up with the relaxing of the pandemic issues, but this is good timing for us. Plus, the Real ID Act takes effect in 2025, which essentially says that if you're going to fly even domestically, you got to have a passport book, passport card, or enhanced driver's license. So our products are a passport book, passport card. So a tremendous drive for those products is going to be happening in the very near future.
that helps a lot. Thank you.
Okay. Then the film so the expenditures for the passport program is here. You have the film, the postage, the part-time FTE finance coordinator. This includes the benefits, the net total earnings from that, and then you have the part-time FTE finance coordinator that would be coded to utility billing. There's the other half there. These are the revenues that were generated from 2016 to 2020. The application fees, the photo fees, and then you have the total breakdown. You can see in 2020 it dropped dramatically, which you can understand why. And then you have your comparables, which is the City of Mill Creek. They run Monday through Saturday, and I'm betting that Saturday is the one that's the big revenue driver because people can come in. We are doing 1 to 4:30 Monday through Friday is the hours that we would think we were going to do this. And then the City of Lake Forest Park, Monday, Thursday, Friday, and again, that Saturday, 4 hours a day. City of Mill Creek has 3 agents. So you can see the revenue that's generated from that program is $356,000, and they're budgeting $1.6 million for 21 and 22. That's what they budgeted. City of Lake Forest Park, they have a budget of $372,000. And this is really tiny, and I apologize. I have the PDFs, if you would prefer to see those up on the screen, but I wanted to show it before the additional FTE and passport program implementation. It's $35,000 is what we had budgeted if we had used our existing staff. And this is the amount that it would cost for, this is what the finance cost is right now. This is what has been budgeted. And then I did listen to your suggestion, Councilmember Sonmore, about putting the one-time expenditures down below into that other financing uses. So this is a little different presentation than that was shown during the budget. So those are the one-time expenditures. So that's the only difference here from the thing. But you can see after the additional FTE and the passport program implementation, the revenue generated would be $150,500. And then the finance department, this would be the additional expenditures for those programs for the one FTE. And then this is the ending fund balance after, before and then after. So you can see it will generate additional revenue over time, especially if prices start increasing. You can see that on the prior slide, I just have $150,500 every year up until 2028. And, the revenue generated might go up or down, and I just kept it a flat rate. So staff recommends that the City Council approve an additional FTE in the Finance Department to be dedicated part-time to the passport program and part-time to utility billing, and an ordinance to adopt the budget amendment for 23 and 24. And I do have those PDFs if you wanted to see the ordinance or anything else that you would want to see.
Go
And
ahead,
if you have any questions.
Councilmember Sonmore.
Well, I just thank you all for getting this back on track for this, because I've been wanting to see this come back, especially the revenue that we've missed or potentially will miss. I just have to ask the question, and I'm sure you've thought about it, and I was just trying to think about it too, is opening on Saturday for 4 hours, but then I was thinking to open City Hall, have one person here, the safety of that person. Any ideas of putting it in the police department on Saturdays for 4 hours? I'm just asking the question of why we didn't do Saturdays. And I think I can answer part of the questions, but I just thought about what you guys had thought about having Saturdays with that new person.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about having that person on Saturdays, but just because of the utility billing portion, I didn't know logistically how that would work. And exactly, being open on Saturdays, having City Hall open, but then doing it in the police department. Yeah. It's a good idea. I did think about it. And maybe in the future, we will go along that route. Just starting it up, though, I think we need to try and do those hours 1 to 4:30, and then, eventually see what we could do possibly to do it Saturdays, because, yeah, that would generate a lot of revenue. Did you have any?
Just echo your thoughts, Saturday is by far the busiest day of the week.
Oh.
Thank you. Saturday is by far the busiest day of the week. I worked for 6 years on Saturdays at the city of Mill Creek. And they were, from the time we opened the doors till the time we closed them at 5, a line out the door, people routinely waiting 3 to 4 hours just to get their application. It was convenient for families, so thus the Saturday demand. It sounds reasoning to, if we could offer that, it would work.
Yeah.
Well, and right now, if people needed to go on a Saturday, they have choices. It doesn't have to be Mountlake Terrace. They have Lake Forest Park or Mill Creek.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you. Commend you on looking for solutions, for our community members that are going to help them have better customer service experiences. I know on a personal level, I've been waiting for the passport program to come back, and would love to sign up myself and my kids to come and be early on in that process. I guess kind of to build on what Councilmember Sonmore asked, have we thought about maybe even just, could we do, and I know I would assume that there's lots of considerations here, but I do wonder if even doing like a 2 to 5:30 versus a 1 to 4:30, just kind of thinking about more standard business hours and trying to give folks some option to be able to plug in like after traditional business hours might be a nice thing, if not now, in the hopefully near future.
Yeah.
If this becomes, something that we are fully full and can add some hours, I think that would be a really great way to encourage and enable folks to be able to plug in both to the passport services as well.
Right.
Actually, let me ask a follow-up question there. Since they're doing both roles, when they are doing passport services, they are not answering utility billing questions, or how does that, how are they navigating those two separate kind of focuses?
Yeah, I was thinking that during the time that they're doing the passports, they're just passport, because we do have another finance coordinator position, so this would be 2 finance coordinator positions. The current one would be able to answer questions and do the cash receipting and everything. And then, so during that time, that other person is working on passports. Then in the mornings, the passport person would be working on utility billing. That was the idea anyways. Yeah.
I think it's great. And again, appreciate not only you looking for great solutions for our community, but having it being a positive budget impact. On top of that, I think is great,
Yeah.
and really do appreciate all of the work, both in general and on this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, Councilmember Woodard?
Thank you, Mayor. Just so I know that we ask it, I couldn't see the numbers, so that's on me. I'll look at that a little bit later over the weekend. But it seems like it's predicated on we hire, they show up, it pays for itself. If that's not accurate, then I could not ask my question, but presuming that's base level accurate, we hire, or we authorize, they don't come, can we still afford the position?
Who doesn't come?
The folks to get the passports. Just want to make sure that we can afford the position and it isn't, we can afford it because people are going to come and do passports. Because then the next thing that comes along and they shut us down for whatever reason, I do not think removing that. Anyway, crossing lines, sorry. I just want to make sure we can afford it. That's all I'm asking. And not because we expect 15 minutes around the clock people coming to get their passports, which may be the case.
Yeah.
I remember getting mine here with my family when we were literally in this space. It's not this building. And then you helped me get the second renewal. So I know people want the passports. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure we can actually afford it and not have to tell somebody, well, you were great for 6 months, but something happened and now I got to let you go, right?
Yeah, part of the nice thing is that utilities will be paying for half of that position. So, yeah, that portion will be paid halfway with utilities. And then I think we will be able to afford it in the future. So if we took out and we just had like 35 or anything like that, if you just played with the numbers and then looked at that, from what I'm seeing, if you look here, I don't know if you can see that. I don't know if I can zoom in or not. But yeah, you can see the bottom line here is in 2026, 7, and 8, our operating revenues are under our operating expenditures. But again, I may have underestimated on revenues itself, in general, because I was trying to be conservative based on how inflation was and, numbers not coming in. But now that what we've heard from the economic person is that it looks better than it did before, back when I did this budget. So, yeah. Any other questions?
So on one of those panels, you had what we did in 2007, 2008, and so on and so forth. And we did make a lot of, because I remember almost every time I went into City Hall, there was always people waiting for passports. And we did a really, really great job. Of course, now that we haven't done it for a while, people are going to have to start finding out and finding their way to Mountlake Terrace again. But I think now that even with travel, even domestic travel, you're going to need a passport. So
Yeah.
the need is going to be there. So I think that, I don't think that we're going to be having somebody just do nothing. I think that
Oh, there's plenty, believe me, in finance to do. So
they're going to be busy doing everything else under the sun
Yeah.
anyways. Anyone else? Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Okay, so next on the agenda is the review and discussion of the resolution calling for a special election concerning annexation into South County Fire.
There we go. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. For the record, Stephen Clifton, Assistant City Manager. Before I begin, I just want to say that between the time you adopted Resolution 869 on January 12th and today, this has been a monumental effort to get to this point and produce this many documents and look at the financials and negotiate agreements and plans, et cetera. So I just want to thank South County Fire staff. With us tonight, we have Bob Eastman and Leslie Hines. And then I want to thank Janella for helping out with the financials. And she met with myself and and Bob quite a number of times to review the numbers and again and again and again to make sure that what we were presenting this evening made sense and they're going to be as accurate as possible. And then also other staff who have assisted as well. We had a meeting with Bob and South County Fire and then also city staff to specifically talk about the use of Fire Station 16, and that relates to the use agreement that's in your packet. And so I invited Jeff Betts and Ken Courtmanch and Pete Caw and Gary Knight and others to a meeting where we all collectively talked about, okay, whatever terms we put in the agreement, let's make sure that we're all understanding exactly how this station is going to be used should the council decide to put something on the ballot. So there were just many, many, many meetings and a lot of emails and a lot of conversations that took place. So hopefully what I'm going to present to you tonight and what's in your council packet makes sense and is understandable, not only for you, but also for the public. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is really to talk about the potential annexation into South Snohomish County Regional Fire Authority. And I'm going to go through a series of slides that take us from the point where I first started presenting on January 3rd up until today. First, I'll start out with Snohomish County Fire Overview, and you've seen this map before, but there may be people out there in the audience who have not, so I'll just briefly talk about the fact that Snohomish County Fire serves nearly 300,000 residents in a 57 square mile area of southwest Snohomish County. The population served includes unincorporated communities of Snohomish County. Briar, Edmonds, and Mountlake Terrace are served under a contract, and you see those shaded in yellow hash marks. And then Linwood and Mill Creek are located within the South County Fire area. That's the more solid yellow area. Staffing, South County Fire provides full-time staffing at 15 neighborhood stations. Daytime staffing includes 70 employees and nighttime 64. The governance includes a 7-member board of commissioners, 2 at-large, 5 districted, and if the voters of Mountlake Terrace say yes, Mountlake Terrace residents actually will be able to run for to be a commissioner. And then in 2023, the estimated tax rate was $1.22 per thousand of assessed valuation, equivalent existing customers within the fire authority. So on January 3rd, 6th, and 12th, I gave 3 presentations, one each night. And South County Fire Regional Fire Authority provides fire and emergency medical services for the city under an interlocal agreement for fire and emergency medical services. The current 20-year agreement expires at the end of 2024, and that's why we're here tonight. Starting in 2024, fire EMS services will cost the city 4.5% more than in 2023. And starting in 2025, the city will need to be annexed into South County Fire or enter into a new contract at a cost that is the same as others are paying currently within South County Fire. If the city were paying parity today, or the cost that other people living within the district are paying, we would be paying about 81% more than we are paying under our existing contract, which is very favorable to the current residents of Mountlake Terrace. And it would be about $3 million more for the same service. So the city is at a crossroads in the delivery of fire and EMS services, and a new arrangement for providing those services must be secured by the end of 2024, and a new agreement will need to be negotiated and will include new terms if annexation does not take place. Options for the city to consider. The city started looking at its own fire department. As I discussed before, this is cost prohibitive. Contracting with another city. Linwood is part of, and Mill Creek recently annexed into the South County Regional Fire Authority. Briar residents will vote on annexing into the RFA on April 25th, 2025, under what is called a special election. The City of Edmonds contract with South County Fire RFA doesn't expire until 2030, and they wouldn't be interested in annexing at this time or partnering as well. So we need to negotiate a new contract for services with South County prior to the end of April, by the end of April 2024 for the delivery of services, and costs will increase significantly. Based on city officials considering possible options, the council has concluded that South County Fire is the entity that could provide the most effective service at the lowest cost for the same quality and level of service. So on February 12th of 2023, the council approved Resolution 869 requesting annexation into South County Fire Regional Fire Authority. The current situation, the current 2023 estimated service charge is $3,496,000 plus benefits, snow 911 dispatch, and supplies for a total of $3,771,022. The contract will increase, that's a 17.2% increase than in 2022. And in 2024, as I mentioned earlier, there's a forecasted increase of 4.5%, or $160,000 above 2023 amount. South County Fire retroactive pay will be due the first quarter of 2023 in the amount of $216,000. So under the current situation, this you have not seen, but the city currently pays for its service contract with South County Fire using a portion of the city's general property tax levy and all EMS levy funds. There's also transport fees that are generated within the city, and a fire protection or utility tax that also helps contribute revenue to pay for fire and EMS services. Property owners currently pay the city of Mountlake Terrace via their Snohomish County assessor property taxes, and then the city in turn pays South County Fire for those services per an interlocal agreement. Transport fees are currently collected by South County Fire. South County Fire pays those to the city of, gives those to the city of Mountlake Terrace, who then remits those back to South County Fire. So it's an interesting process there. City of Mountlake Terrace 2023 fire EMS revenue sources that cover expenses. The voter-approved EMS levy amount, the amount generated for 2023 is $1,345,036. Transport fees generate about $421,873. Utility tax generates about $259,946, and general fund property tax generates $1,744,167. And that amount, like I mentioned earlier, does include LEF, medical benefits, no 911 costs, and supplies. So the total there is $3,771,022. So what does annexation into South County Fire Authority mean? What it means is that if Mountlake Terrace voters approve annexation, it changes the way property owners will pay for fire and EMS services. More specifically, post-annexation, effective January 1st, 2024, property owners, residential, multifamily, and commercial, will pay directly to South County Fire as part of their annual property taxes. The city's EMS levy would be eliminated, and transport fees would be paid directly to South County Fire. So the city would not be a venue to pass those through. Regarding the city budget, the city will no longer be paying South County Fire for fire EMS services using general funds, EMS fund sources, or the fire protection or utility tax funds. So that will help stabilize over time the city's property tax rates and move the city's budget towards longer-term stability. So what it means specifically related to the amounts I referenced in the earlier slides is that the voter-approved EMS levy, that would be eliminated. Transport fees, those would be paid directly to South County Fire. The utility tax, that's no longer needed for the fire and EMS services. And then as far as the general fund or the property tax, the $1.7 million, that is the amount that I would call discretionary, in that the council will need to make a determination as to whether or not you want to give all or a portion of that back, or maybe none of it back. So I just ask that you keep that number in your mind, but I'll also bring it up a little later in my presentation. Regarding what happens if we do annex in operationally, regarding anyone calling 911, South County Fire will continue to serve the city of Mountlake Terrace residents, so there will be no change for our residents. Regarding resources, South County Fire has stated they intend to move more resources to Fire Station 19. Bob and Leslie, if you have questions about that, could come up to the table and answer any questions you might have related to that. South County Fire would continue to operate a community paramedic program to respond effectively to low acuity 911 calls. And also they would continue conducting robust public education and fire prevention programs. If annexed into South County Fire, what would Mountlake Terrace property owners pay for fire EMS services? So we looked at trying to make annexation revenue neutral, and that's just simply not possible because of the amount of money it would cost to pay parity, or this at the same rate that other property owners are paying within the district. It's just not possible without contributing millions of more dollars to make that happen. And so the same situation existed in 2022 for the city of Mill Creek, where 76% of the voters chose to annex into Snohomish County Fire RFA. A key part of the annexation discussion is whether the city council wants to help mitigate some of the impact of additional cost on city voters, and if so, by how much and for what purpose. The net effect on taxpayers is based on what the city council decides to do for year 2024 and beyond. And the reason I say 2024 is because if the voters say yes to annexation in April of this year, it will become effective August 1st, and Snohomish County Fire will start collecting taxes on January 1, 2024. So what you don't have in front of you, but what I have prepared in draft form, is a resolution which would express an intent to reduce the general property tax levy by a certain amount per thousand assessed valuation in 2024 if the council decides that they want to move in that direction. So if annexation is approved, what would property owners actually pay for fire and EMS services? So Janella and Bob helped put together some numbers, and we put it in a format that's on this slide that we hope is understandable. So under scenario 1, if the council were to give back all $1.7 million to the residents for a 2,000 square foot home that has an average assessed value of $616,000, the property tax increase would be $318.24. The benefit charge would be $70.46. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner of the slide, you'll see home square footage column. And if you go down to 2,000 square feet and then go to the right, you'll see a benefit charge of $70.46. That is the number that you see under the benefit charge column up above. And so you add the $318 and the $70, and you get $388.70, and that is an additional amount of $32.39 for that valued home for a 2,000 square foot home. So another scenario, when we met with the City Council RFA committee, they asked, well, what would happen if the amount per month were $40? How much would that equate to? And scenario 2 is giving back or reducing the rate so that the amount that goes back to the collective residents is $1,023,000. The property tax increase would be $401. Benefit charge of $70.46. That doesn't change for a 2,000 square foot house, for a total annual increase of $471.96 or $39.33. So it's possible that the council says, I'm not sure I want to support scenario 1. I'm not sure about scenario 2. What about another scenario where we do something between $32 and $39? And so the way you could look at this is under scenario 1, if you give back all the money to the residents, the $1.7 million that you're currently using to pay part of the contract, and you look at that compared to scenario 2, it's about a $720,000 difference. So that means that there could be $720,000 that the council could use for other purposes, whatever those might be, whatever you choose those to be. And if you go somewhere in between, maybe instead of 720, it's 350,000. That if you instead of 1.7 million, you go to 1.5 million. Just kind of split the difference. And if you were to not give any of that money back or not reduce the rate, then the property tax increase would be $520. Benefit charge remains the same for a 2,000 square foot house for a total increase of $590 annually, or a monthly cost of $49.25. So what's interesting here is if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, the benefit charge rate actually changes by the size of the home. And so a 1,000 square foot house would have a benefit charge of $49.82. So that number would actually replace the $70.46 in that column. So I kind of ran the numbers, and under scenario 1, if you had a 1,000 square foot house, your monthly rate would go down to about $30. If you had a 3,000 square foot house, that $86.29 would replace the $40.60. And that first line item, scenario 1, the amount would only go up $1 a month. So there's not much of a difference between the sizes of the home. It's like anywhere from $30 to $33 under scenario 1. But we wanted to frame this, and we hope that this is understandable, but I think I'm going to pause right now in case you have any questions about this table. I could answer those questions before I move on.
Do we have any questions, comments? Questions.
Okay, maybe comments at the end then? Okay, great.
Go ahead.
And maybe you're going to get to this, Stefan, but I guess, so when making this part of the decision, because this is a newer, like we are just seeing this information tonight, we've been talking about annexation and moving forward with this. I guess I'm curious, I guess if we were to make a decision tonight, or we weren't to make a decision tonight, are we locked into that decision? Or I guess what is our timeline for making a decision? And I guess, yeah, just could you talk through that piece?
I would hope that you make a decision by Tuesday.
Tuesday.
I wouldn't say you have to make it tonight. So you have time to think about this,
Yeah.
because the resolution that I prepared, it does not include a specific number.
Okay.
So whatever you decide, you could say on Tuesday night, I support resolution number so-and-so as amended to include reducing the property by this rate. Okay. Right? So instead of the 1.7 million, that equates to about 33 cents per assessed valuation. The 1.23, that equates to about 19 cents per thousand. And so we're able just to take that then and say, oh, if you want to do scenario 1, we'll just put that number then Tuesday night into the resolution before you adopt it.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, that helps, thank you.
Okay. So what happens if annexation is not approved? As I mentioned earlier, the contract cost, the city would need to enter into a new contract at parity, and the city really will need to do that by April 2024, so that we can start budgeting and for the new increase in the cost. And under the new contract, as I mentioned before, we'd be paying the same rate as other South County RFA property owners, and that will add, and I put an example in here, if the city were paying parity today for the same interlocal agreement contract, we would be paying an additional 81% more, and that equates to about $3,020,000 more dollars out of the general fund. So that's significant. So that means we would be paying a total of about $4.7 million out of the general fund. And considering what the general fund is used for, the different programs and services and operations, it's a pretty significant issue to address. Future increases in property tax levies or cut services and programs, the City Council will have to consider new revenue via new property tax levies and/or address impacts to services, projects, and/or programs caused by additional funds needed to pay for contract fire and EMS services. So in order to hold an election on April 25th, I've listed a number of items that relate to actions needing to be taken by the City Council. The first is a resolution requesting annexation. The Council did that on January 12th. That was Resolution 869. And we did provide that to the South County RFA Board of Commissioners on January 13th. So that step is completed. Also, a resolution calling for a special election. That's in your packet. And it's specifically requesting Snohomish County Auditor to place a proposition on the special election ballot. And that includes a ballot measure language and explanatory statement. And that really is the narrative describing the purpose of the annexation. So that's in your packet, and the resolution actually includes the ballot measure and the explanatory statement as part of that. And then I did speak with the Snohomish County Auditor's Office. We do have to submit that by 5 p.m. on Friday the 24th. I did obtain the general email address we need to use in addition to an individual to make sure that it gets there and we are able to email all that information to them. We don't have to hand deliver it. And then also, I'll be talking about this in a moment, but we also need to submit specific forms in order to have certain kinds of information presented. It ties to the pro-con committee, and I'll discuss that in a moment. There's also a resolution in your packet that needs to be approved by you. One relates to the RFA plan. This is the amended RFA plan and restated plan for South Snohomish County Fire and Rescue Regional Fire Authority. There's a new section 10 in there that really relates to adding the city of Mountlake Terrace to a list of other cities that currently have services provided by South County Fire. So that's essentially what that plan does. It also includes some liability language in there as well, which I'll discuss at the end of this presentation. The resolution also, if approved, would approve a pre-annexation agreement, and the purpose of that is to help implement the RFA plan and to ensure a smooth and seamless transition of services and responsibilities from the city to South County Fire. And Exhibit 1 of that pre-annexation agreement is Fire Station 19 use agreement. This relates to my earlier comments about getting staff together, and that includes the city and the fire staff, and saying, okay, how are we going to use this station? And I should note that, we are going to retain operations on the ground floor of Fire Station 16, just like we do today. Pete is adamant about making sure that his police vehicles can remain on the ground floor and are secure under the garage. That's fine with South County Fire. We also have some IT operations under there, as well as electrical panels and things, and we'll still retain all of that, the contents and things. And so that use agreement establishes all the terms on how the station will be used. It includes references to insurance. We will continue to insure the building since it will remain the city's building. However, South County Fire has agreed to pay the premium for that insurance policy. So that's just something to note. Regarding a pro and con committee, we have posted 3 notices trying to solicit residents who are willing to volunteer and participate on either a pro and or a con committee. And getting to the earlier question of when that needs to be done, that really should be done by Tuesday. And we've gotten a couple names. Hopefully we'll get more, because there's a limit of 3 people that serve on each committee. And then they need to choose amongst themselves who's going to be the leader of that committee. Then they have to prepare their statements by March 1st of this year. So they have to move pretty quickly to get their position statements together. And related to the amended RFA plan, the pre-annexation agreement, and Fire Station 19 use agreement, I provided some preliminary terms during an earlier presentation. What I have in front of you now is a more refined set of terms that actually which are included within the use agreement. The transport fees, the RFA will be entitled to bill and collect for the transport fees related to transports originating within the city. And I mentioned earlier that the city currently receives the remitted transport fees from the RFA that originate within the city limits, and then we remit those back, and now they'll just go directly to South County Fire. Liabilities, effective August 1st. Oh, yes.
Stefan had a question. Perhaps this is a practical question that we can ask our friends from the RFA, but just in terms of billing of ground transport, or someone who, say, doesn't have insurance, and in terms of, say, charity or if they don't have commercial insurance.
Yeah, so
what's the practice?
our policy is this, and in the RFA is we treat, and we do this now for all our contract cities, and we have the same agreement as long as it's reciprocated with our neighboring fire departments. And I think Mukilteo is the only one that balance bills. So we take insurances and payment in full for those that are either our contract cities of ours or members of the RFA. We take insurances payment in full. We do not balance bill, so we write that off to the levy. Now, for folks that are not residents, we send 3 bills, and then we have the ability to go collections. We do not. And there was some early times where folks wouldn't give you insurance payments, and we had some challenges there where people were insured and just wouldn't give you any information. So we put some things in place to keep that from happening. Never had to execute it, but right now insurance is payment in full. If there was a resident of the RFA that doesn't have insurance, they let us know that, and by policy, it's written off to the levy.
Thank you for the explanation. I think that strikes a good standard for protecting residents.
And our neighboring jurisdictions, so if Snohomish Regional comes in and does a transport, they honor that they treat our residents within the RFA service area as their residents, and we do the same with them. So we have that reciprocating with, I think it's all but the city of Mukilteo right now, and we're working on Mukilteo to make that happen too.
Thank you. I was going to save it for later, but since you're here, I was going to say maybe I'll save you a return trip. I guess increased resources. So I know that was something that the assistant city manager spoke to, that if we were to move forward with annexation, that would increase the resources here in Mountlake Terrace. And I know that is actually a really important piece. I guess, could you just talk about what that increase in resources is like?
So we've had, we do what we call a standard of cover, which we bring in a third party that looks at the service area, looks at call demand, looks at future call demand. We tied that in with our capital facilities plan. And so the most recent identified increased resource needs in South County, that includes Briar, Mountlake Terrace, the city of Edmonds. And the standard cover that we had prior to that identified the need for an additional resource in South County. When we say that, we're looking at a minimum of right now a transport unit, so either a medic unit or an aid car that's dedicated, right? So right now you have an engine and a medic unit at Station 19. It's cross-staffed, same crews. But with the call demand that's happened right now, Station 19 runs about 2,900 calls a year. We really need another resource running out of Station 19. Typically, historically, we get to 2,000 calls a year for a station. And that's the time you need to move to having additional resources to help cover that demand, because your station reliability has gone less than 80%. And so we try to stay at above 80% for that station reliability for the first due, what we call first due. So at least somebody's there to respond out of that station or that area 80% of the time. And so we've been higher than, I mean, we've been over 2,000 calls for a while in the city. And so when we talk about additional resources, at a minimum, we're talking about a 12-hour dedicated EMS transport unit. And I think, you know, and we have the ability to move things around. Some of that can't happen right away because you need to hire people, train them. And it takes us probably a year to get somebody hired and through the academies and on board ready to work. So, you know, with the city of Mountlake Terrace becoming part of the RFA, I have the flexibility to move resources around strategically. And it doesn't, and a move of, let's say I move a current PAU down to Station 19, it doesn't necessarily take away from the overall service that we have or the, right? I added resources, really the resource I added needed to be further down south. I have it at 14, I have it at 21. Moving it and strategically actually helps the RFA as a whole. So that when we talk about that, we're talking about that and potentially longer term hiring people, increasing staffing as we all know. Population's rising and density's coming, and you guys know that better than anybody, that we are going to need more resources and more people over time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the extra info.
I'll just go off of that. I have another question, but speaking of increases of population, what can our citizens expect to see in increases after the RFA takes over? Let's say those 800,000 new addition of housing units in Snohomish County over the next 20 years. Let's just say in the next 10 years, the RFA will be responsible for increasing costs, and how, and if you could explain, how will the citizens expect to see that? Because they're going to be surprised when they see it on their tax bill when they it changes over. But the increase will be now upon the RFA, right? And can you talk a little bit about how you would increase costs to citizens in the future, since it'll be taken out of our hands?
Yeah, so like everybody else, our property tax is limited to, we're limited to the same 1% that you know, we're limited to 1% increases without going and doing levy-lid lifts. So the strategy for us would be the same as if we actually needed additional revenue, whether it's the EMS levy or it's our general levy, we're limited to 1%. And so we would have to actually go ask the voters. If we got anything more than 1%, we'd have to actually go do an initiative and ask the voters to raise the levy lid, right, for that. And so like everybody, 1% is not keeping up with the current cost of doing business. And so, you know, we would have to periodically go ask the voters to either raise the EMS levy, do a levy lid lift on the EMS levy, or a levy lid lift on our general levy. We do and are fortunate to have the benefit charge, which is not associated to assessed val. It's associated to the improvements to the property and what the property is used for. We have a little bit more discretion with that, but that right now is a 6-year benefit charge that needs to be renewed. So we need to be able to go and we need to have that renewed by the voters to continue the privilege to be able to do that. So in order for us to substantially increase revenue, we have to ask the voters if it's anything over the 1%. And I can say there is going to be a need as things continue to grow. We've identified the need of, you know, our facilities planning has identified the need of 3 additional fire stations along 99, right? We're looking at property at 215th and 99, the Old Valley Village property. With what's happening with all the growth, we're looking at some property someplace around Alderwood Mall Parkway. And then we have property up off of Manor, the old Siegel lumber. And so we've identified those gaps already as potential needs for additional fire stations, which actually means additional people. As the density grows, as the vertical, because one of the challenges we're going to face is, you know, we pull up to your house and walk in your front door. As things go up, we add response time for going up elevators and going up multiple stories, which we need to account for. And what that means is I have to add that to my drive time. And we need to strategically figure out how we place resources to limit response time, and it's not what we historically think of drive time. It's now the vertical response to get to the top floor of a 15-story building for EMS calls, right? And so we're working through that, but I think to answer your question, we have to go to the voters to ask for those dollars, and they have to give us an affirmative approval for us to collect it.
Thank you. My question too, I just have two more, is with Fire Station 19, I see that you're having the property, the real property, but we had the question of the actual land. So can you just talk a little bit about how our land is incorporated with City Hall and the library? So do we get to keep our land?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
And so then,
Everything remains the same except that with the use agreement, the fire station will be used just as it is today.
perfect, thank you. So I'd like to touch upon some of the tough questions, if you don't mind, is the different scenarios that you asked about with the money and the different charges. I think it has to be discussed, and it's one of those things that it's very hard for council to discuss sometimes because we're talking about citizens' monies. And if we were to look about compound interest over collecting that extra fee, I understand within the next 6 years, we'd have an extra $9 million that we could invest in the city, if I have some of the math or retaining that correctly. So one of the things that we always look at is the revenue streams coming into the city. And one is looking for those extra funds that would come in, and the other is not having those extra funds. And we've been told now that the extra funds for fire would be having something to be voted on, but we're also looking at different facilities within our own cities that we could use this extra funding for. And so, Janella, do you want to explain a little bit about what we talked about at the RFA committee and how those different money scenarios would look?
I was wondering, first, Councilmember Sonmore, if it's okay with you, if I could go through the liabilities, because I
absolutely.
think
I'm
they do tie in part to what you're talking about. And then, yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing we need to focus on. Absolutely. So just to kind of complete the rest of this, effective August 1st, the RFA shall assume responsibilities and payment to Snow 911. Effective August 1st, Snohomish County Fire will take on the obligations of paying the Left One retiree medical benefits, including any long-term care cost. The City of Mountlake Terrace will retain the Fireman's Pension Fund and will make required pension payments as required to eligible participants. The RFA will assume the city's liability for the retroactive payment billing due, which I mentioned earlier, which was $216,000. So that could stay with the city. The RFA shall not assume any liabilities of the City of Mountlake Terrace. The city will retain ownership of Station 19. I mentioned earlier it requires insurance. We will be paying for that, and we will be reimbursed by South County Fire. Fire Marshal Service, we will need to have Fire Marshal Services continued, and so we will be entering into a separately negotiated interlocal agreement with South County Fire post-annexation. And then the city continues paying the year 2023 contract amount. So I do have the process laid out, but it's been refined since the last time I presented it to you. But I think at this point, I think that's a good time, Janella, maybe to answer Councilmember Sonmore's question about the scenarios and revenue and things like that.
Okay, I think your question was about the different scenarios and what the general fund balance would look like and what we could use the revenue for if we had those different scenarios. So like we did with in the committee meeting, I showed the spreadsheet with our financial forecast is what I had presented. And so I used the actual spreadsheet, and then we put these different scenarios in there, and it was quite dramatic. So that 1.7 million is our general tax levy right now is 4.8 million. So we're using 1.7 of that to pay for the fire services right now. If we went to parity, which means we would have to pay $6 million, and right now, like I said, our general property tax levy is 4.8, we would have to use that whole general property tax levy to pay for fire services. Now, if we annexed and we gave back 1.7 of, let's say it's that 4.8, because we're using 2023 dollars because that's what we budgeted and asked for, so we know what those numbers are. So if we reduced that 4.8 by 1.7, that would decrease your fund balance by a certain amount. If you only reduced it by 1, that would leave you with, what, 700,000? That would grow over time, you know, because you would increase it by, let's say, 2.5% or 3% or whatever over the years, and you could use that for your different programs that you would want to fund, like sidewalks, streets, overlay, any of that. And if you gave nothing back to the residents, you could use all 1.7 million for streets, parks, roads, sidewalks, all of those things.
I think that's a good qualifier because it is, you know, it is related to the general fund. It's unrestricted. So it really can be used for any purpose.
Because we do transfer, if you look at the, I've looked at this spreadsheet so many times that I can see it in my head, so you guys might not be seeing what I'm seeing. But you look at it and there are certain sections of the financial forecast and the budget that shows transfers out to the capital projects. And then there are transfers out to the street fund and transfers out to recreation. That's what those transfers out use, and that's what we use some of the general property tax levy revenue from, or any revenue that we get from the city, we use that for. So we could increase those transfers to the capital funds, you know, or the streets or recreation, or keep it within the general fund and use it for different programs that we would want. Saturday passport. Did that answer your question? Okay, you're welcome.
So the last two slides actually showed you these during the last presentation. They've been refined, and so they have specific timelines. So following up on Councilmember Murray's question earlier about when decisions have to be made, really, you formally wouldn't make any decisions till Tuesday night anyway. So you could be formulating maybe a response by then, or even if you gave us some direction tonight because you knew what you wanted to do, we could include that information in the resolutions and post those as early as tomorrow. And really the decisions that need to be made are approving the resolutions, and the resolutions reference the putting it on the ballot, and they also approve the plan, the RFA plan, the pre-annexation agreement, the use agreement, and then there's a third draft resolution that we could place on the agenda as well if the council decides they want to give any portion of that $1.7 million back. So. And what I mean by that, it means just reducing the rate, the levy rate. That's what that means.
Go ahead, Councilmember Sonmore.
And with that being said, I just want to follow up. That's for our citizens, that we're, City Council isn't keeping it. It's investing back into our citizens. If we decide to do that, it's investing back into our city. And that's where that funds would go. It doesn't go into a special fund that is a slush fund out there. We would talk about special purposing that money or have that money for something. So I want to send out a proper message that that money goes back somehow to the residents with a project or something that we want to see, like putting a new pavilion out there, getting our roads updated, but something that is substantial. We're just not doing that because we think that's something that we should do, and other cities are doing it, but it's something that is beneficial to all. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you.
So I hope that with the information in the packet and the presentation this evening that we've been able to answer your questions as best we can. And if you have any other questions, we could try to answer those right now.
Are there any other questions? And if there are no questions, are there any comments? Oh, go ahead.
Mayor, just,
Councilmember.
thank you, Mayor. Just want to briefly build off of Councilmember Sonmore's comments about prioritization of any funds the city might benefit from in addition or in adding to its general fund. I would just like to say, hopefully, given how sometimes regressive the property tax can be, hopefully the city could build in some equity lens in reapplying any of that. I get that it will be just going back into the general fund, but I, for one, would appreciate some thought along those lines. Getting far ahead of myself, but I appreciate Councilmember Sonmore's message on there.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Murray?
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate the conversation, and yeah, I feel like I need a little bit of time to think and digest. But I wanted to say thank you. I think I was skeptical about the timeline, and not because I doubt our city staff were amazing, but because there was a lot to be done in a very, very short time period. And I want to say thank you for all of that work, because I even seeing it listed out, I can't imagine all of the things that have happened and all of the conversations that have taken place. And so I really do appreciate all of that effort to get us to a place where we have all of the information in front of us to be able to make a decision. So thank you all for all of that work.
You're welcome. I really should thank a lot more people. I'm forgetting names, but also Andrew helped extensively as well. Just a number of people that we had to check in with from time to time about so many different topics on this related to this matter.
Okay. Did you want to go? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you. Yes, I concur. I mean, the work that's been, and the heavy lifting that's been done by everyone involved has been phenomenal. I appreciate all the work. And I think the main message I want to get across is it is really important for the city to allow our citizens and encourage, well, we can't encourage our citizens, I guess, to pass this, right? But it's important that our citizens do pass this and annex into the fire district for a lot of reasons. There are a lot of important reasons. I'm anxious to hear about the, getting back to the pro and cons statements and who's applied and getting more information about that. And I'm interested in hearing what the no arguments are, because I think that's going to be a really difficult sell. But I'll tell you what one of those no arguments is going to be, is it's going to cost more. And that's the main reason that we may not pass this in April. And so to reduce that impact, I think it's really important for us to send a clear message to our citizens, to our residents, that we want to reduce that impact on their pocketbook as much as possible to ensure that we do get this passed. And therefore, I strongly encourage us to go with scenario one and reduce the impact as much as possible. It's still going to be a property tax increase of $318, a total increase of $388. But that's a small portion of what would happen if we don't annex, what's going to happen to us. And either we're going to have to drastically cut services or drastically increase costs that are going to get passed on to our citizens. So I think it's really important that we that our residents pass this. And to do that, I think it's important that we send a message that we're going to reduce that impact on their pocketbook, and we protect their pocketbook. And I do like the idea of having more revenue to support our services
But let's do that through economic development and other ways of increasing the revenues, not through taxes. We're already increasing taxes on our citizens and rates on our citizens, and going to have to face additional possibilities with utilities very soon and other issues. So let's be careful on how often and how much our citizens are going to have to additionally pay over the next few years and more. And they're already they're feeling the impact with inflation and every other entity of government that's additionally trying to add taxes. So it's a heavy lift potentially just because of the added tax burden they're already going to face. Let's reduce that impact and encourage them to get this passed so that we have better fire service with reduced impact on the city.
So isn't that their argument might be that it's going to cost more, but it's going to cost more either way. It's going to be a little bit more, or it's going to be a lot more. And I think that that's what we need to get across to them, that if they don't pass it this time, it's going to be a lot more. Because if you still want fire service, you're going to have to pay a lot more. That's true.
So I might respond to your comment about you can't ask someone to vote yes, but you can educate and inform. And so to that issue, I've already put together a list of questions and answered, frequently questioned. Mill Creek did this as well, and that's something we do plan to post on the website. Of course, we would only do that following the city council voting to actually put this on the April 25th ballot. And then we've already met with South County Fire and internally with city staff to talk about how do we most effectively educate the voters to help them understand what this measure really is about, how it impacts them financially, and how services will continue to be provided, et cetera. And so we are working on trying to provide and prepare as helpful information as we can for the public.
Just a curiosity question. So if we're doing it differently from Breyer, if we had that suggestion that Councilman Wall was saying, would it look different on the ballot? Would it talk about how much we're taxing our citizens, and it would show something different for Breyer?
The ballot measure would read the same, because the ballot measure really isn't about whether or not you're going to reduce the rate. That comes via the approval of a resolution where you expressed an intent to do so, should the vote take place. So that's a separate decision. Yeah. The ballot measure simply says shall, and actually it's in here as well in the resolution. It's very similar language to what the city of Mill Creek prepared, and I can describe that very quickly.
While Stefan's looking for that, I think it's important to note that the state law says that a ballot measure really has one topic, and so the ballot measure would just be about annexation, but the messaging is what would be different than the messaging for Mountlake Terrace, and the messaging for Breyer would have to be different, and we've already talked to RFA staff about how to make that happen. And so the resolution that Stefan's looking for is actually the measure that this council would need to take to formalize the commitment. I'm sure the citizens don't just want to hear some verbal statement about reducing the commitment. They're going to want to see a resolution that formalizes that.
Can I go on to ask, are we the only city that would be doing it this way if we did not collect all the fees? How have all the other cities voted?
I don't know if I could answer that, but getting real fast, I should say that the ballot measure itself just simply says Mountlake Terrace seeks voter approval to annex into South Snohomish County Fire Rescue, and then it says shall the city be annexed into effective date of, and then the explanatory statement that you put in there, you actually can reference that the city will reduce its property tax levy. You actually could put it in the explanatory statement. It doesn't actually go in the ballot measure. I don't know if Mill Creek did that
They did.
in their explanatory statement.
Yeah, Milk Creek did reduce what they collected in their tax
Was
revenue.
it, and I know you've explained it to us before, Leslie, but I always like hearing it again. Did they do partial? They did it in a different
did
way than what we would be doing it. Is that,
Milk Creek did.
sorry, I just,
You can turn that on.
so. We're always taught sometimes to ask questions that we know, but I don't remember this one, so it's,
So they,
ask the expert.
they did it very similar. And they did their calculations, and I believe when they did that, they took into account the inflationary issues that they were going to deal with, i.e. because of, last year, the 6.2% increase in inflation. So they took that into account in their calculations. But for the most part, they took what was in their general levy, what was coming out of the general levy, and reduced, I want to say it was just over 2.7 is what they reduced, what they reduced their collection rate from. And I want to say they kept a little, but that was partially because of the fire marshal contract.
That's all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can actually go to the City of Mill Creek website. They still have the questions and answers on the website, very similar to what we're going to do. It actually cites specifically how much they were going to reduce the general levy, property tax levy, and how much they were going to reduce the EMS levy. And each of those numbers was slightly above ours.
Go ahead, Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess since we've been talking about Breyer and kind of their process, and for those of us that haven't been involved in the conversation, what is Breyer doing?
Breyer is not reducing their tax, their general tax. And that will be in their explanatory statement. And I assume that could be addressed in any pro-con statements too.
Councilmember Woodard.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to go back to Mayor Pro Tem's comments and make sure that this makes it out of the RFA committee, because I don't see it up there, which technically there was a scenario 2B, if you will. You're looking at 2A in my heart. 2B was you take the number that's there, but you put I don't know if you can do this, a term limit on there. We're only going to do that for 5 years, and then we'll revert to scenario 1. So you're able to, which I would think everybody at this table would agree, we do not have enough money for this city to be where it should be, period. This is an opportunity where it's not new taxes, you're already paying it, and we're actually reducing it. And then at the end of 5 was arbitrary, I would hope we would run scenarios to say, well, this is how long we would need that. And then we revert back to scenario 1, which is just my way of saying scenario 3 was never on the table, but we have to put it on the table to make sure people understand there is a table. But at the end of it all, we're just trying to recognize that we're in a very unique situation, that the costs, as we've already said, is going up no matter what. To the mayor's point about it's going to cost more, I would say it's not only going to cost more, but one of the scenarios will bankrupt the city. Let's not mince words. We'll bankrupt the city. So in that regard, I would hope that whoever's going to write the no keeps that in mind. But pulling back and thinking about, well, what do we do with this moment in time, specifically because we're in this unique situation? Is there something we can do? Because there isn't a single person who comes down 56th and goes past 230th and thinks, this is a great looking street, and I'm so happy all my great resources are right down this same street. And then looks at us and says, why don't you fix this street? And is surprised to learn, because we don't have money to fix that street. This is the type of thing where you would be able to equity lens and prioritize. I presume what Councilmember Payne Donovan was talking about was, let's not just put it all in the city center. We have an entire 4 square miles that needs help, meaning that I know there are more streets in 56 that do not look very strong. And that is a reflection of, do I want to live here, which is a reflection of, and it just keeps snowballing from there. So just kind of want to put that out there. I think there could be a 2B, which again is a term limit for lack of language here, to then revert to all back on scenario 1. So I think I'm asking, can we do the term limit 2B? But I don't know if that's really a
Councilmember
question.
Murray. Okay.
In other words, hypothetically, Councilmember Woodard, what you're saying is, if I understand what you're saying is, for 3 years, we would reduce the rate that would equate to $1,023,000, 1.2, well, 1 million, approximately $1 million, and then it would revert to 30. That's 19 cents, and then would revert to 33 cents 3 years from now. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Yes, it would revert to the 33 cents per thousand starting in 3 years or something. Okay, I just want to make sure that I was understanding. Okay.
Councilmember Murray?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make sure that I follow. So, I mean, scenario 3 is on the table, right? It is up there, and that is what Breyer is doing. So maybe it wasn't on the table as part of the conversation with the RFA group, but that is on the table for us as a council to consider, and that is what Breyer is doing. And I guess I would just name one council member, Payne Donovan. Sorry, I was going to say it's different. So I think when you were talking about equity, I guess where I was thinking of, and I think one of the things that I've been thinking of as part of this process, and one of the things we've had conversations around, is as we have grown as a city and as the demographics, particularly when we talk about socioeconomic demographics and who can now afford to move into our city, have shifted dramatically, we have folks that it is not a challenge for them to look at these increases, and they can afford to pay what it actually costs us to provide the services that we do. And we have folks who would be very burdened by paying some of these cost increases, even at the low end of them, right? And so I really would love to hear us entertain the idea of how do we look at providing support for some of those folks who are most burdened by these increases. And I guess so for me, I don't know that any scenario feels like it is off the table. I guess this is where it feels hard with the timeline, and I'll name that piece of it, because it feels like we could have a really thoughtful plan where we talk about some of our infrastructure needs that every single resident, comes to us with and has concerns about, and we talk about our most vulnerable, residents and how we ensure that these cost increases don't, dramatically burden them, and we talk about. I think we were just hearing at the session. Many of us were at a sessions the last 2 days where it was something like, over 50% of renters are now like are dealing with food insecurity. And so we recognize there's a lot of needs in our community, and those are often needs that we want to address as a council, that we don't have the resources to address. And that doesn't even get into the things that have been on the table forever, like the recreation pavilion that we know we need to find solutions around. And so I guess I would love to have a thoughtful, conversation, and the timeline is also very challenged, which, I think goes back to some of my initial concerns. But I guess for me, none of those scenarios feel like they're off the table, and would love to have, thoughtful, internal thought process. Would love to hear from community members around their thoughts around some of this between now and Monday. And I guess I will just ask one question as part, and I'm going to ask again, Stefan, even though I there is the vote to move or to put it on the ballot. Mm-hmm. Our decision around this piece is not necessarily going on the ballot, but does go in the ballot statement. So what is our deadline really is Monday, or it's kind of
Tuesday.
Squishy? Okay. Oh, sorry.
It's not
Tuesday.
squishy.
Sorry. Yeah, with the holiday. It's not squishy. All right. Sorry. That's a technical term, squishy.
Yeah. And for the record, I should say that the Council RFA Committee in no way, shape, or form ever said that scenario 3 was something that they would be willing to support. It's simply a reference to show the council what it would cost if if the rate wasn't reduced. So you can kind of compare the other two scenarios. That's all.
Councilmember Sonmore, and then.
Can you just talk about, some people are going to ask, how will renters see this? And, we have certain tax exemption that we're losing a lot of money on that we give builders. They pay no taxes for 8, 10, 12 years. Can you talk a little bit about, just in case somebody wants to know, how does like an apartment building pay for their fire? You know, we don't talk about that, and this kind of goes on what you were talking about, Councilman Murray, about, you know, they might see it reflected in their rent, but if we could just talk just a little bit about that, people that don't own property, but how it is, you know, taxed against a property or an apartment building, because our look of our downtown will change, and I'm just...
Well, this scenario that you see on the screen relates to a assessed valued house at $616,000, and it's assessed on the property. And so it's the property owner who will pay the county the taxes to pay for fire services. The property owner may or may not pass those charges on to the renter. Probably happens right now as we speak. I mean, there's all kinds of things that a property owner who owns an apartment building might pass on to their renters. We don't know unless we look at their financials. But that's something that I think is an unknown. But the property owner, whether it's residential, commercial, retail, whatever, they would be paying the taxes to pay for the fire services.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, like Councilmember Murray said, a lot of the people can afford this scenario, any one of those scenarios. But there is a portion of the population who own homes in the city that are elderly or low income. Well, elderly is what I need to focus on, and there is such a thing as that lower the exemption to lower your senior exemption to lower your taxes. I'm finding out that a lot of people don't know about that or even know how to do it. So I'm just wondering if we can help. So here's another thing that we can use part of that money that we save is to have somehow somebody, whether or not we hire them or have nonprofits help us, but to help them do the paperwork to get the senior exemption. Because then, because in the case of my mother, it was a $5,000 tax, property tax that she was only paying $300 on. And so that would really, really help.
I wholeheartedly agree. The form is kind of tricky for some people to understand, but that's an excellent point.
Go ahead.
I'll just add that I've seen my own neighbors taken advantage of by unscrupulous, flippers, those, seniors or those with medical conditions who've, fallen behind and who don't know about the assessor's discount or deferral or exemption programs, and I wholeheartedly agree.
So if they start saying something like, I can't afford this, and so so somebody steps in and asks all the right questions to see if they qualify for the senior exemption, and then help with the paperwork. Because I think that if we do that, there'll be a lot more people who are elderly, who own homes. They'll be fine with this.
Mayor, I'd just like to add that I think Mayor Pro Tem Wall really, and Councilmember Woodard, I think I'm sort of drawn to both of their arguments. I think there's a need and an opportunity to talk about threading a needle, and I think we really need to count on we need to make a compelling case to the residents to consider the great need to make the right choice. But I guess I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about what a 2B or a 1B option might be, because I do like the sunset concept that Councilmember Woodard raised.
I might be able to help you a little bit from a dollars perspective. So scenario one reduces the rate by 0.33 and doesn't free up any more general fund money for the city council. Scenario two frees up $720,000 in general fund revenue. Another option is if somewhere between, if you reduce the weight, not 33, and then not 19, but somewhere in between 20-something, that could generate $350,000. And then it's a matter of the council determining how to spend the money, and how to prioritize the spending of the money. We've heard road maintenance tonight, maybe fixing potholes and things like that. So that's a way of looking at this. You can just kind of interpolate between the numbers, and council can determine whether or not they want to give back scenario 1, scenario 2, somewhere in between. Yeah.
Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, first of all, just getting back to your note on the need to identify folks that are in need. I put a pin on that thought for our ARPA discussion, because I want to be utilizing some of our ARPA dollars for identifying our most vulnerable citizens and figuring out how to help them. So then getting back to, and yeah, I appreciate Councilmember Woodard's thoughts and ideas on kind of a sunset or scaling back. My concern is for anybody familiar with campaigning, messaging needs to be simplified. And so the simpler the message is, the easier it is to sell. And sunsetting doesn't take a lot of extra work to explain, but sometimes it could be a little too much. So I appreciate the thought, and would certainly be more supportive of that than just going scenario 2 as presented. But I just caution us to think about our messaging and how we're going to sell this how somebody is going to sell this to the voters. How we're going to educate the voters. So that would be my only thought. But then it gets back to Stefan's point on, it doesn't have to be scenario 1 is presented or scenario 2 is presented. It could be scenario, 1.5 or whatever that is, say, 1.6 or 1.5 million back to the residents. So some additional food for thought.
I don't see anyone else with their hands up. You have more?
I do, actually, not on this topic. I wanted to get back to the pro-con residents that have submitted their names for discussion. So before we leave this topic entirely, I just want to make sure we touch on that. Unless there's anything else or additional thoughts or comments, I'd just be curious who submitted their name so far and where are we at?
Is it public yet?
Yeah, we've got two so far. One lives in the city of Briar and wants to be on the pro committee. There's nothing restricting someone or limiting someone from living outside the city from doing so. We have posted the notice 3 times because as of yesterday, we only had 1. And we thought, oh, that's not good. We only have 1 people on the pro and con committee. So we extended it to today, and then we issued another one today, extending it to Tuesday morning, because we really wanted to put a full effort into trying to get volunteers to participate on the committee. So we don't have a full list of names for you this evening to share. We do, hopefully we'll have a list for you to choose from Tuesday night.
Okay, and do we have any so far on the cons?
The first person that said they want to serve on a committee did not indicate whether they want to serve on the pro or the con committee. So Jennifer contacted that individual and requested them to identify which committee they want to serve on, and we haven't heard a response yet. The second one wants to serve on a pro committee.
From Briar?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Does it have to be a citizen and not one of us?
I would have to ask our city attorney, but I think it would be difficult for a council member, but I don't know.
We've had board members be on the pro committee.
Have you?
Well, because if we're not getting any names in there, I'm thinking, let's get this done.
Former council members.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
that would be okay.
Yeah, former council members certainly could, because they're essentially citizens
citizen.
right now. They're not elected officials, so they would have every ability to serve, on a committee.
I think anybody has the ability. I don't think there's any restrictions on whether they're a council member or not, but I think it would be better to have others. And I would encourage us to reach out to some certain former council members that are very familiar with the subject and understand the RFA,
Who's still on the committee?
who's still on the committee, for instance.
Anyone
And it
else?
would be terrific if we had a robust pool.
All right.
So just to provide some further guidance, you can certainly make your decisions Tuesday night. I will submit to you the draft resolution, which references a reduction in the rate. What you decide, then you will, the council will make a motion to approve resolution, whatever number Jennifer assigns, as amended, and as amended would include for example, a rate that the council chooses to reduce the levy by. And so that's something then we could include within the explanatory statement, not the ballot itself. The ballot is simply asking, do you want to annex into the RFA? So.
Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make sure that I'm clear, and I'm not indicating that this is where I think we should be, but I also want to make sure that I understand. So if we're saying reduce the rate by a certain percentage, if that percentage is 0, does that ultimately still fit the language that does that create any issues on Tuesday as we're trying to navigate this process?
If you did not reduce the rate,
Yes.
there would be no need to include any language in the
So we could just
explanatory
strike that.
statement. If you reduce the rate, for example, 0.33, that would be referenced in the explanatory statement. If you reduced it 0.19, we would put that in there. And we would put those same numbers in the resolution itself. If you did not reduce the rate at all,
Right.
there would be nothing in there because there would be no change to what there is today.
Right, so I guess my question is, as you're putting together language for us to review and vote on Tuesday, because we don't know that right now, I guess we could still look at all 3 of those options or
sure.
the host of other options, and we
Absolutely.
could figure out that language piece on Tuesday.
And when you make your decision, that's when you'll make a motion to amend the resolution to include the rate.
Understood, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I hope that helps.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think, try and help clarify, I hope. We're approving several different resolutions, right? And one of them is the resolution on a commitment, basically, to reduce the rate. So that's going to be a separate piece than the other pieces. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. One resolution, very simple. You're requesting the Snohomish County Auditor to place this ballot, which is Proposition 1, on the April 25th special election. That's that resolution. Accompanying that is the ballot language and the explanatory statement. The second resolution will be to approve the RFA plan, the pre-annexation agreement, and the use agreement. And a third resolution, which is not in your packet, but there's a draft prepared, and we'll have that for you Tuesday night, will say, having considered this, and this, the council expresses an intent to reduce the levy rate by whatever amount the council decides. And so that'll be a third resolution. That number will then tie to the number that's in the explanatory statement. I know it's a lot to digest, and believe me, and we've been in the weeds, and so it's a lot easier for us to understand, but I hope that we've been able to make this as clear as possible this evening and for everyone.
If I can just add, though, in theory, if the council does not do the third resolution because you cannot come to an understanding or agreement as to what kind of reduction you want to do, then basically there is no reduction.
Anyone else? Okay.
Okay?
Do we, well, we're going to talk about it again on Tuesday.
Yeah. For Tuesday night, you'll have the same information in your packet as you do tonight with an additional resolution referencing a possible reduction.
Councilmember Murray?
Thank you, Mayor. One more thing. Could we get the presentation? I don't think we have the presentation in tonight's materials. Could we make sure that we
Yes,
have
Jennifer's
that?
posting it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Woodard?
Yeah, I actually wanted to address our South County Fire colleagues who are here with us tonight. Earlier in this process, which was probably only like 2 weeks ago, it just feels like a long time ago, I asked the question, I think in the subcommittee, this idea about we as a council can't advocate, we can educate. However, South County Fire can correct and lobby do what they need to do in their process. And I just want to let you know, my concern was the internet. You know, you put something out there and then somebody jumps in and oh my goodness. So when we first announced this, there was only one comment, and the comment was centered around this idea of feeling rushed. And I just want to pass this on. I should have done it on email, but I didn't. That one of your firefighters actually responded. And I really just want to say how much I personally appreciated that, because that's the type of thing that I'm talking about, where it's like, just because you became aware of it today doesn't mean it was rushed. We've been at this a long time, and he was much more gracious than I would have been, as I just wasn't right now. So do not quote me on that, but nonetheless, quote me however you need to. But nonetheless, just saying that from where I'm sitting, that's the type of heavy lifting I think that's really going to happen when we get closer to the ballot showing up in people's actual boxes, right? So it's like, I'd love to say, oh, there's nobody who wants to go con, but I know that's not true. It won't be until it's in front of them, and then at that point, you know, it's going to be what it's going to be. But I appreciate it. You've already established that we are not afraid to jump in and say, wait a minute, not accurate. Didn't say you were wrong, not accurate. So appreciated that. Thank you.
I have a question. When we get our ballot, it's only going to be the Mountlake Terrace portion, and then Briar only gets their portion, so we don't get to see each other ones. We can see it on the voters pamphlet, side by side, but it won't be in, okay. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. It's almost 10:30, so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so we still have a few more things on our agenda, and that next one is the review of the amendment number 1 to interim city manager professional services agreement.
Yeah, before you is Amendment 1 to the employment agreement with interim city manager Andrew Neiditz. And this amendment extends the contract through March 31st. And it's really about as simple as that.
There isn't a 1B?
No.
What's coincidental is that the current agreement terminates on March 2nd, which is the day before the interview process. So I was concerned that we needed to get at least a week or two beyond that.
If the council wants to approve Amendment 1, they can place this on the consent agenda for Tuesday evening and then approve the amendment via approving the consent agenda.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think there actually is a 1B in that, but not for consideration now, for a future time. I think the importance is, so April 1st is, you said April 1st is what we're extending it to April 1st, is that right?
I thought it was March 31st.
March 31st, well, okay. The caveat is, you know, this is assuming that we make a decision and we negotiate a new contract with the new city manager, and they start before the 31st. And so that we may need to revisit this again in the future, but this at least ensures that we have an interim city manager to get us through the next month. So consent calendar, please.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so that'll be on the consent calendar, and we can move on. Okay, to public comment. Do we have any public comment?
There's no one signed up, and there's no one in the online audience. No comments.
They didn't stay for all of this. Okay, then, has everyone reviewed the February 21st meeting agenda? Is it posted now? Because it was only on the link earlier. Okay. All right, so everyone is fine with that? And are there any council comments? Well, let's go, Councilmember Murray and then Woodard.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be quick. I just had a quick question about the event next week on Thursday. Do we need to let you know if we're coming so we can notice that, or is that something that we can just show up to? I guess I want to make sure that.
That's a transportation. We can just show up for that.
You can let us know, and that way, if there's more than 4 of them, notice it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Woodard?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll keep it short as well. Quick question. Do we have any off-system bridges in the city?
Bridges?
I know, it sounds like a strange system question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Off-system bridges is what they're called. I don't even know if we have any bridges. I don't think overpasses count as bridges. So the answer is probably no, but I
Well, we
figured I
have
was at a
one
session
in
this morning.
denial.
We have little ones that are crossover, I can think of in a development. That's what,
Goes
what
over.
is it exactly?
So this morning during this session on the infrastructure, they pointed out that they have not very many applications, but a lot of funding available for off-system bridges. That's the best way I can put it. It literally made me go, is an overpass considered a bridge? I don't think so. So I'm not even sure, but I knew, let me ask, if nothing else, because we're looking for money and ways to fix things, and this is one of those pots where it's not a main system. I guess that's why they call it off-system, something you wouldn't even think about, but it's still a hazard, if you will.
I do remember seeing that, and I forwarded it to our Public Works Department.
I'd rephrase the good council member's question. Do we need some off-system bridges?
They take some off system.
I only know of one little bridge, and I think that's it. Councilmember Sonmore?
Just very, very quickly, I know it's late. So if anyone wants to do the pro or con committee for the fire districts, you would write cityhall@mltwa.gov, and you'd submit your name and a short statement of interest. So that's all. By 9 a.m. on the 21st.
Yes, and indicate whether or not you want to serve on the pro or the con committee.
Thank you. All right, do we have anyone else? Okay, next is adjournment. We're adjourned.